the time it takes, the detail it takes through going through your experience writing the book?
Yes, and it gave me they were very determined. Like, I thought it'd be a lot of guys who enjoyed the job, but a lot of them felt like they did it for different reasons and they were motivated by different things, but it was really fun to see that. So, as a reporter, you never get to go with rookies, right? The officials never let you ride with a rookie because they're like, what's the rookie going to screw up and embarrass us? Well, that was gone. And so I was with the rookie homicide detective at the scene of his first murder, and his eyes were as big as silver dollars. And he was so honest with me. He's like, I'm really nervous. Like, later, I asked him.
Right.
I was really nervous. I didn't want to mess it up. This is my first case. I wanted to prove myself. And all I got is a dead body with no ID. It sucks. And I'm praying that my partner gets there soon because he's experienced and knows what he's doing. So that was his motivation, to prove himself. Another guy was to prove himself. Another one wanted to speak for the poor woman who was bludgeoned to death. And every other word, he was so angry by this murder, every other word out of his mouth was effing crackhead. You know, he hated this guy who did this. He knew it was like some handyman, drug addict who went in and did it.
There's always been a perception, and again, for full disclosure, being former law enforcement myself, there's a perception that we can just shield it off, that we see these horrific scenes, we get involved in these horrific events, and we can just leave it when we go and clock out the day and go home and be family people. Did you, in your investigation or in your writing, did you notice that a lot of these homicide detectives took their work home with them? Did it affect their family life? Did it affect their personal life as well?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there are divorces and things like that. I definitely noticed that I saw it. They did not want to talk a lot about that, like, because, you know, these are alpha males and females.
Right.
They don't want to admit things
Yeah.
to them. But, you know, one of my main characters, Al Brooks, he admits, like, Andre Brooks admits that he, at the end, like, he can't do it anymore. Like, he could no longer triage the drug deal scumbag murder and the Red Ball murder, you know, of a real victim. Like,
right.
He couldn't do that anymore. And I watched Billy Watts, a detective, man, cold as ice, job, everything's about the job, go up to a dad whose son is dying in the operating room or the emergency room, you know, brains oozing out of the poor son's head, and ask for the code to his son's phone. And then nothing, just work, just business. I got to solve this case, you know, he's done it so much. But then I watched him break down as much as he was going to break down 2 days later in the same hospital, investigating a fatal fire that killed a family of 4 because that could have touched him.
How hard is it?
He couldn't no longer make the excuse that my kids aren't going to be drug dealers. There's not going to be a Walters Lane or whatever, but like his kids could die in a fire. And I saw him, you know, that really affected him, that fire.
Well, let me dive into that a little bit. How hard is it for them to separate the work from the emotion, particularly on scene? Is that a difficult situation?
They're very businesslike. They're doing the job on the scene, and that I didn't notice much emotion, like maybe anger, sometimes frustration, but not sadness, not depression. The one time I saw it was with this guy Watts, and he, you know, watching him kind of. I watched him internalize. We were watching. They pulled the sheets back on this little 4-year-old and 8-year-old girl, and they burned to death, and the whole room smelled like smoke because they were so saturated with it. And he leaves, does a death notification, walks out, gets in his car, takes a deep breath or two, hits a speed dial button on his phone, and his son answers. You know, and at that moment, I knew, you know, he had to reach out to his kid. You know, and that's really, we're asking. Like, I dedicated the book to the men and women who toil in the heart of darkness, so we don't have to.
Right.
And that's not just cops or firefighters or soldiers or whatever, but there are a lot of bad jobs, family show, bad jobs out there that we don't do around this table, you know, and they do.
But this includes the medical examiner. This includes the entire aspect of the criminal
One of the craziest people in the book is one of the medical examiner investigators.
Oh, lunatic.
Yeah. Joking about golden showers over a corpse.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
Again.
Family show, sorry.
So here's the question is... Did you find that when you finished the book that did you or did you not actually convey that the human aspect of these investigators that do this every day, was that an intention that you had, or was that just a result of being embedded with them for so long that just came out in your writing?
Came out.
Really?
I didn't know what to expect. You know, I've been betting before, so I know how the game is played, but I'd never done it so long. Like when you're a newspaper reporter, I embedded with homicide detectives and shooting detectives at the Baltimore Sun and at the Washington Post, and I did all of it. But it's different because I wasn't there every day, all day, 48 hours straight. Right? I was there as much as I can get, and then I'm getting a call. Oh, you got to cover the murder of the 9-year-old girl. Hey guys, I got to go. I'll be back. I'll meet you back in 8 hours. Then you're back in 8 hours, and you're there at the scene, and then you're watching this, and it's for a tiny little. It's for a 3,000 word newspaper story, which is nothing. I could sneeze 3,000 words now, and this was, you're sitting there with nothing to do, you're bored, nothing's going on, and you're just sitting there watching these guys BS back and forth, for 2 straight days. And then you're like, you get home, oh gosh, man, there were so many. I fell asleep by the end of February, I fell asleep pumping gas. I fell asleep at a red light. I watched an investigator fall asleep mid-interrogation in the box with me, him, and a suspect. Well, I guess he was a witness.
Really?
He first started snoring. He dislocated his thumb on his head. He started snoring. The other detective in there was just laughing his head off, wouldn't do it. And there's a really funny scene in the book where they're really good at deceit and trickery. And another thing I was surprised by, you asked that earlier, sorry.
No,
I don't want to leave that, right?
No, leave it.
They're so good at telling if you're lying. I remember my first couple days there, I'm sitting there going, oh, that's a great story that guy was telling, man. You're really being a little rough on him. It sounds like his poor situation. Detective listening goes, Dell, he's lying, man. Watch. 4 hours later, the guy's sobbing and confessing. They're very quick at that. Like, they can tell if you're lying. They don't always know what you're lying about. You may be lying about something totally unrelated to what they're doing. But they can tell, man.
Have the investigators that you embedded with, have they read the book? Mm-hmm. Have you gotten feedback from them?
I did.
And?
I think most of them respected what I did. One of them posted on Facebook, everything in here is true. And so that made me feel good. Like, I don't think they liked they knew warts and all. And a couple said, hey, do you really have to put that in there? I'm like, I do. I'm sorry, man. It's warts and all. Like, this is it. I'm not going to get into, like, where you live or anything like that. Or
Admiral Ken.
So, my question's around the creative process. Okay. So, full disclosure, published fiction author. And so, did you start out with an outline? Did you have a pretty good idea of where you want the story to go? Did it kind of evolve on its own as you started the work? Can you walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, so I spent 6 months with them. Then I tried to get more money to spend more time doing like a year-long thing. My editor's like, no, you don't. Your idea is too misinformed.
Right.
Misformed. So I looked at what I had. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this great moment, February 2013. So then I went and outlined it. I spent a month outlining what I wanted to do. Had all my characters lined up. Spent basically a year writing it. It took me a year. I wrote 120,000 words, and I turned it in. My editor had read half of it, and then the rest of the other half, he did not like how it turned out. It was too much. So in one afternoon, I cut 40,000 words.
Wow.
Now then it went up again 5. So it was 85,000 words.
So how did your previous book, as you mentioned, Rawhide Down, great read about the day Ronald Reagan was shot, the attempted assassination by John Hinckley. How is that different than this book as far as being able to tell that story, like you said, one day versus 3.5 months?
That wasn't so different. It's just a completely different book. I mean, like Rawhide Down, I was a tick-tock of one day, tick, 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 and all the characters, and they came into the story as the day went on, and it was very dramatic in and of itself. I mean, I didn't have to explain so much why the book was important. Like, Reagan was shot, he almost died. This day changed Ronald Reagan, therefore it changed the world, right?
Right.
And everything was on the edge. And so when I interviewed a doctor who had literally held Reagan's beating heart in his hand, I don't need to explain the significance of that.
Right.
This book was different. I had to tell it from a vantage point where not only was I flying the wall and reporting what happened, it wasn't so much the events that were important. The reader in Iowa is going to be invested in some of the cases and care, but I was choosing themes and scenes. Like, there's a red ball that's the arc, the big unsolved murder that's the arc of the book. And that is like about the detective who has the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he will be defined for the rest of history within this community by whether he solves this case or not. The pressure. And then another one is the detective I mentioned earlier, Watts, how it changes you as a person. Another is the detective who wants to speak for the 71-year-old woman who's been murdered. Another scene is sometimes, these are messy. It doesn't get solved in 24 hours. This is not a TV show. Another is counterintuitive. It's solved in like 4 minutes.
Right.
It's crazy. And so like they're all different. You know?
Did you find yourself having to keep objective, not taking the pro police stance as you wrote this book, or was it easy to keep objectivity as you wrote the book downstream?
It wasn't so much this gets to the Admiral's question on like process and
Right.
character. So it's weird. Like they stop. Everything happens true. Everything's factual. I have all the facts and everything happened. But as a storyteller, I'm leaving out a lot of stuff. And I'm not making anything up, but I have to leave stuff out. And I'm moving characters around as they happen, putting, this scene no longer works. It's a great scene, but it doesn't work anymore. It's gone. This scene kind of works, but what does it really mean? And like months later, it would hit me, oh, that's why that scene's so important. I didn't know. And so I didn't ever get pro-cop. I was pro-character. And so,
Right.
these are my
Was
characters.
that easy to separate out? Character versus cop?
I don't know. I'm not really pro-law enforcement. I'm not negative law enforcement. I think I don't
Is that
know.
because of the beat that you cover?
Yeah, I just don't. I'm not. I think that it's probably some people will read this and think it's sympathetic to cops. Other people have read it and been like, these guys are awful. And it all is a Rorschach test, but no one has disputed everything that happened. It happened, and they even are like, and they will do this to each other. They'll
Right.
be like, man, you nailed Ebaugh. Oh no, you nailed Kroll. And so that made me feel good.
Dan Lipner.
Well, in the context of what most lay people have as far as an association to law enforcement, especially murder, so that being what Hollywood interprets. So go from either great movies, TV shows like Law and Order, or something darker like The Wire. Like, what does Hollywood get right, and what does Hollywood get wrong from your experience actually living it?
They get like little silly things right, but it's so much more doggedness, creativity, and luck, and it's longer than an episode. Even The Wire, I think The Wire got at the truth of everything, but was not always factually right. Mm-hmm. And so what I liked about my book was that it's factually correct, everything is true, and it gets at some of the truths to these men and women who do this job. And so
what would you say was one of the bigger truths that came out?
So I think that, CSI, they found that strand of hair which linked to whatever, and they did that. Well, I was in a house in a scene. It's luck and doggedness. So this guy gets murdered in this car. His 2-year-old's in the car with him. Overnight, the 2-year-old lives, doesn't freeze to death or anything, but the guy's dead. They get his phone. They figure out who he was meeting. He's a drug dealer. The guy comes and shoots him, runs off, and through the phones, they figure out who the guy probably is. They find a bag he had dropped near the scene. More clues. Here's the problem. And they spent days and days canvassing, and in fact, they found that bag, which was really critical to helping them, like 2 days after doing all this. So now they have a choice. In the same neighborhood, his grandmother lives and his mother lives. After you kill someone, do you run to mama or grandma? Well, you got to make a decision.
Yeah.
They said, we looked at it, we thought about it. They can only search one house. They're not going to get both warrants. They search mama's house. Tear the house apart.
Nothing.
Find nothing. They find his ID, so they knew he lived here, but no porn, no shoes, barely any clothes. He's like, maybe some old drugs that have been hidden there. They can't find it all. Then they're leaving. And this tech looks at the wall, peers really closely at a light switch, and goes, is that blood? And the detectives come over and look at it and say, one of them goes, that looks like chocolate. It's chocolate. And another detective goes, swab it anyway. Just swab it, we'll see. Swab it, 3 weeks later, DNA comes back. It's the victim's blood.
Really?
He shot the guy, black spatter got in his arm, he ran home, swiped the wall by accident, and transferred the victim's blood to the house. Now, how do you get there? Without being dogged at the scene and being creative, thinking, where would he have gone? And pure luck. But you don't get the luck without the other two.
Right.
But that's not how... Have you ever heard a TV show going down that way?
No.
No, it's all like, well, we have this phone record that does all this, and it's... Or another detective, for example, solves this a murder of a witness is really hard to solve. Because who wants to be a witness in the murder of a witness case, right? He has to solve this case, and he eventually figures out... Like, he gets a tip from the mother who says, I think I heard John and Stan did it, and they're carjackers. They were ordered to kill my son, who was a witness in this murder case. Well, the detective tracks it. He gets put on, and what people don't get, too, is you're not just working one case. So he has that case, and then the next Monday, a murder-suicide comes out in College Park, and he has to work that, and he's doing all this, and he bumps into a detective and says, hey, can you watch the video with me again, just to see if you recognize anyone in the video? It might be this other person. And so the guy comes and watches the video, right? Now he's being dogged, right? Come, look. the cop he has come look at the video is an encyclopedia of PG criminals, right?
Right.